My name is Richard Thompson, and I am Enterprise Data Manager at Sellafield, based up in West Cumbria, and we're part of the nuclear industry in the UK. Now, for those of you who are coming with some kind of expectations maybe about the type of things we're going to talk about today, there is an Alteryx element, so there is a little bit of technology, but we are in the culture theatre and therefore are focusing on aspects of data culture and some of the softer skills that we've used to bring in as part of our data journey. And I should also point out that I only became Enterprise Data Manager at Sellafield in 2019. Prior to that, I was involved in simulation and modelling and those kind of things. So it's in a sense, it's my personal journey as well as Sellafield's. Now, I ask for your indulgence at this point. Hands up, everybody who's actually heard of Sellafield. Wow, now that's a lot more than I thought. I'll put the question a different way. Hands up everybody that thinks Sellafield makes electricity. That is outstanding, or one person. The reason I ask that is that we're often attributed as being a nuclear power station, and in fact we're not. The basis of Sellafield's journey for many years has been around the reprocessing end of the fuel cycle. So fuel goes into a reactor, it stays there for a number of years, and once the fission products build up and it's no longer as efficient at generating electricity as it used to be, it comes out, it came to us and we recycled it. And for many years we developed the plants and the tools and the technologies that made that happen. So that was our kind of purpose at the time. But Sellafield is far more than its purpose. We often say our people are our greatest asset. And there's 11,000 plus people who work for that organisation. And as you saw from the image earlier on, it's a fairly densely packed site, so lots of things going on and a very kind of intensive focus of activity. But for all of the 11,000 people who work within the business, we're backed by a supply chain which is probably now in excess of that number. There's kind of 50,000 people out there in the supply chain supporting us every year. Now, everybody in this room is probably a stakeholder of Sellafield. We are publicly funded. The taxpayer pays for the work that we do, which has always been pound positive for the UK, but we are budgeted annually at around £2 billion, and every single one of those pounds needs to be spent wisely, because it's taxpayers' money, but on top of that, because it's focused on high hazard and risk reduction, and every pound that isn't spent on that is spent on something else, and the high hazard risk reduction has to wait. Over the years, the nuclear industry has played a significant part in reducing the overall carbon emissions of the UK. But in August of this year, we reprocessed our last fuel rod. So the overall mission for the Sellafield site is changing. And this is where one of the distinctions between us and more contemporary businesses kind of comes into play. Our new mission is around the safe disposition of material on the site. And in order to fulfill that mission, we needed to repurpose our organisation. So in 2020, we created our Manifesto. And our Manifesto sets out three things: who we are, what our purpose is, and the mechanisms through which we intend to deliver it. So we are Sellafield, always were and always will be, and we are creating a clean and safe environment for future generations. And the multicoloured boxes that you see in front of you are the kind of commitments that we've made to each other and to our supply chain as an organisation, of the behaviours and the expectations that we place on each other. But the difference between Sellafield and a lot of other organisations is that essentially now we are an environmental remediation company that's already got a 100-year order book. Our out years plans go well into the future to decommission, do the post-operational clean-out of the site, and to safely put that into long-term storage. As part of the work that was done to launch the Manifesto, we also had a new enterprise strategy. And much to my delight, when I saw the enterprise strategy, there was a significant change in some of the tone of the business, because data had never been important to Sellafield, and we hadn't really thought about digital. We'd sort of been through some of the transformational type stuff, but those kind of things weren't endemic in our corporate culture. So seeing that in the enterprise strategy of 2020 was a very welcome change, as well as the desire to exploit it. However, that then lands on my desk. and somebody said, right, your job now, get a handle on the data. So when you're given a task like that, where do you start? And I guess this is part of the themes that play towards data culture that we could discuss this morning. So I took a long, hard look at the organisation, the things we were doing, the things we were doing well, the things we weren't doing at all, and started to pull out some themes that would enable us to pick kind of 5 things. We've done a lot more than 5 things in 3 years, but these are the kind of key ones that I think are relevant for this session and topic area today. So data governance, we didn't have anything in the data governance space. Everything we did have was focused towards security and compliance, but the actual exploitation of data and putting some governance around that didn't exist, which lands us onto quality. We weren't really looking at data as a quality issue. We have quality in terms of our products and our waste products, absolutely. But we didn't look at the actual content and structure of data and whether that was an issue for the business. That leads us neatly to master data. We weren't really getting a handle on master data. There was no specific people and teams that were looking after it. It was kind of baked into the systems and the way that it was constructed under those applications. And then you need to bring in some rules. You need people who are going to help make the change. What empowers you to be different as an organisation? And then finally, data culture. And data culture really kind of appealed to me in terms of a challenge, because culture is a kind of harder thing to crack. But we'll come on to that later on. I also recognised that we needed to put a data strategy together that would be communicable to the business. But that final bullet point there, if you are the data leader in an organisation, I do believe you should be the strategy. And when I say be the strategy, I mean don't just publish it and leave it on a shelf. Don't stick it on the corporate intranet and expect people to pick it up. No, you need to kind of take it with you. And I think the first couple of chapters in the Chief Data Officer's Handbook covers this beautifully, telling you 2 things. 1, you're going to be buying a lot of coffee and cake for people that you've probably never met before. And 2, you should be buying some good shoes because of the amount of mileage you're going to be doing through the business. We also tried to pick up the lessons that we'd learned from kind of transformation programs, where that add technology and stir approach just hadn't kind of landed in the business. We'd bought some things, but then we hadn't known what to do with them. Again, it wasn't intrinsically linked to our purpose. Equally, something that happens a lot in the nuclear sector, I don't know whether this resonates with others, people have a tendency to want to know the end state. What are we actually going to get? Rather than just that sort of philosophy of iteration. Build the next thing that makes us better. So we tried to bake all this into the strategy work and the things we were going to do to take ourselves forward. So I'll start with governance because it's everybody's favourite topic. And this is something that I've termed the lollipop diagram. It's kind of the reverse of what I think a lot of transformation programs have tried to do in the past. So at the top, there's all the aspirational stuff, the sexy stuff, the robotic process automation, the AI, the electronic workflows, all of the things that are kind of offered up to an organisation as being the things that will truly transform it. But in the governance model that we adopted, the lollipops, as they escalate through the different phases, need to have a strong underpinning that's welded into the business in order to support everything that comes after it. So we started off with a centralised enterprise data governance board, chaired by me and a few other people in the business who sat on the big buckets of data. And that enabled us to pull together some early policies, because what you're looking for is people who can give you the credibility and the presence in the organisation to start and make a difference. Once we got some of those things in place, we can then look at where do we want to land the business outcomes. Data strategies are inherently at fault if they don't communicate business outcomes, and a lot of ours centre around our assets, our physical assets, our buildings, our projects, capital spend. So we bring in the people from the engineering capabilities, and we bring in the people from our programme and project partnership worlds and start to get their input into it. In order to enable the outcomes, we need to look at the things in the organisation that provide agility. And I went back to the people who work in our business analytics team, our dashboards team, our geospatial team, and look at how we can use their skills to try and bridge the gap between policies that we've set up and the outcomes we want to achieve. And then we finally land at adoption, where the groups that I've just talked about in the agility layer can start to exploit other things. But it all starts off with that central kind of board that are putting the foundations in. Somebody once challenged me and said, you haven't got a proper governance forum. Bullet points at the end. You don't need one. You need a council of the willing. You need people who are going to commit to the journey and go along with you. And the other thing I've learned about data governance, rightly or wrongly, is that it is intrinsically linked to the maturity of your organisation. Somebody else's governance model will not be right for you. You need to find the one that works for your organisation as and when it is. And don't be afraid to change it, because as you mature, as you grow, your governance should adapt to it. In terms of the roles that we brought in, I identified 3 key capabilities that I thought we needed to see in the business. So I wanted some stewardship there to extend the arm of governance and to make it easier for the business to adopt. In terms of the data that defines and describes us, our MDM, I thought there was a role for a team in that place as well, possibly baked into some of our other tooling, our Sept installation, for example. But the ones that really interested me were the data ops team, the Super Mario plumbers of the data world, the people who can actually start and make a difference, who can stand things up and do it at pace and do it at scale and start to understand how the cloud's going to influence us and what platforms we require and how do they connect together. And what does integration even mean for this organisation? I don't have all the answers. I need people to grow to help me find them. But the one lesson I would say about data roles is, especially if you haven't got them in your organisation now, it's creating the space for them to exist. Because on day one, when somebody turns up to do X, Y, and Z, the X, Y, and Z job won't exist. And the roles that you implement in an organisation will need time to bed in and flatten out. So my data stewards are a lot busier now than they kind of were 3 months ago, 6 months ago, because the organisation is starting to work to them as well as them bending to the organisation. So finally, we come to the ultimate chestnut, culture. And I call it that because I've sat through a lot of presentations in the last couple of years, probably the last 5 years, where we've talked about digital culture, data culture, changing organisational culture. And culture, as we know, is something that happens over time. It develops on its own. It doesn't have a lot of influence. So when we try and reverse the flow, how likely is it that our corporate cultures can change and reflect the businesses and the organisations that we want to be? How likely is it that we can bed in the data culture and the digital culture? So I've always termed it a bit of a chestnut. But if you think back to the slide that had our manifesto on, it's fairly clear what that's trying to do. It's influencing corporate culture. But it defines who we are, and it defines what we do and how we intend to do it and what our purpose is. So I took those kind of 3 lessons and took a long, hard look at it. Who are we? Well, in reality, to build a data culture in an organisation, you are not trying to influence that many of the data people. They already get it. They're bought in. The hearts and minds are fully behind you. So it's about a customer engagement piece and increasing the literacy of the organisation to make a more intelligent customer who knows what to ask for some of the time and who knows how to respond to the answer when you give it them. Definitely something to focus on. What we do and how we do it is where the technical side of things maybe comes in slightly. But Thompson's 5th or 6th rule of data, improve the tools if they will enable you to do more or enable you to do better. Too many transformational activities I've looked at in the past have been a modern way of doing the same thing. Why change? And then finally, that piece about socialisation. Everybody does like a good news story and will jump on the bandwagon. In our environment, absolutely, provided somebody else has taken the pain and the indignity first and the risk of deploying something. But it's no good in an organisation of 10, 12, 15, 20,000 people if you're not sharing it. So the celebration of achievement is something that I think sits very closely at the heart of corporate data culture. So we now see our first Alteryx workflow. It's a very simple one. It was a sentiment analysis one, I think, at the time. But when we first started to see the deployment of Alteryx in the business, we then get this kind of growing acceptance that maybe things in the digital space, things in the data space aren't as mysterious. And it's the visibility and the interpretability of the workflows that kind of makes that happen. In 2020 or 2021, I forget which was now, I was asked to be part of the Alteryx Visionaries program. So this is something that has been built up around people who've done Alteryx deployments within their organizations and kind of led them from the front. And during one of the engagement sessions with some of the other visionaries, I made that quote. Why did I like the tool? Well, because it lowers the bar to entry, but it raises the possibility of what you can do on the back end. And I think a lot of the use cases that we're going to get into now and just sort of run through, not in great detail, but just to give you a flavour of the deployments, absolutely support that. We've talked a lot over the past couple of years about data democratization without ever really understanding what that means. And I think it means many things to many people. But for me, this is kind of platform democratization. Whether you're a low to no code person or whether you're an advanced Python person, there's an opportunity to use a tool that brings people together. And a democratized platform tends to be a more easily federated one. So we're going to some use cases now. As you would expect, Sellafield is a highly regulated environment. You can't just open up your own kind of nuclear plant and start doing a few things. You need a site license, and that site license is something which is keenly maintained and managed through engagement with our regulators, the ONR. They require us to maintain adequate records for long periods of time, and some of these records go on for 200 years after the end of the life of the site. So we could be looking at 250 to 300 years in total. Some of those records are legacy, so they're based in paper. And we have to preserve paper and manage it. I have done for many years, but a lot of the records now are being scanned and taken away for long-term storage elsewhere. So we do have a digital version of it. But for everything that gets scanned, we receive back spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet of retention periods, type of document, storage location, which box it's in, what its personal identity is, and all of these were being collated into a larger database. So as I'm wandering through the office one day, I can see two colleagues scratching their heads and a lot of sighing. You'll generally notice that there's a lot of sighing when there's a data problem and people can't sort of think how to solve it. I said, what are you guys trying to do? Oh, well, we've got quite a lot of spreadsheets to merge together. Let's have a look. And we spent half an hour just talking through the problem. And then I showed them the tool. Now, this is literally the simplest use case I can imagine. You're taking data from two sources, you're blending it together. It's absolutely everything that Alteryx was there to do. And when they had a look at it, they had a go. And I went back to them 6 weeks later and said, how are you getting on? Oh, great. 6 months worth of work has just disappeared. Splendid. Well done. What would you like us to do? So tell your friends. And I was kind of going off and spreading a few licenses here, there, and everywhere in the business, like Johnny Appleseed, and waiting to see what would pop up. But then word of mouth takes over because you've socialised the success. So we've saved a lot of time on there. I've estimated 500 hours, but I think it's probably kind of longer than that now. But it's the ability for people to move that thing on and to talk about it themselves. The next use case is probably one that sits at the heart of everything we do at Sellafield because it's safety. As well as our site license, which covers the entire operating spectrum of Sellafield, each individual plant has what we term a minimum safe manning level. We cannot run the plant if we don't have enough operators who are SQEP, suitably qualified and experienced people. Some of the things that we do on site need to have those kind of personnel available to do it. So keeping a handle on what our minimum safety manning level is quite a complicated business, because when you've got 11,500 people plus 40,000 supply chain, and then you bring in things like their training requirements, because training can expire in some cases and they need to go back through it. You bring in people's leave requirements and when they're off, or sickness, or the attrition, because we've started to see a higher rate of attrition in the business post-COVID, as I think every organisation has. And then you allocate the tasks on top of that. That's quite a complicated model to think about. previously, again, was being done in Excel. So now we've managed to link a load of source systems together, produce a combined data set, but apply over the top some predictive analytics that give us now a 24-month look ahead. And we can see the peaks and troughs and influence the training and present that back to our executive as a kind of rolling report. It's the fluctuations, I think, in headcount, where you've got a lead time of sort of 6 to 9 months to get somebody ready. That's a fairly important underpinning characteristic. The next one we're going to look at was behaviour analysis. Lots of organisations do surveys. We do surveys. We do surveys for our safety culture. We do surveys of employee satisfaction, and on it goes. But survey fatigue has become a real thing. I don't know whether it was something that started in the kind of COVID Zoom era when people were getting bombarded with these things just to make sure they were largely okay. But the other aspect of survey fatigue is the lag time between actually completing the thing and getting some meaningful feedback out of it. And it was a common enough complaint. Breaking it down, well, the quantitative analysis of the data is fairly straightforward, but the qualitative is a bit harder. And the behavioural analysis team came along and said, oh, we found a great tool that we'd like to use. So I had a look at it. All right. Seems viable. It's used in what you do. But before you do that, we have got this thing called Intelligence Suite. And I think there's a good chance we can use this to give you what you want. So bringing in the things like the topic model and named entity recognition, we were crunching large amounts of text and extracting the sentiments and the topics and allowing that to be played back in a different way to different parts of the Sellafield population. We've managed to move it on by about 3 times. So the response to surveys has now gone down from kind of 6 months to probably about 2. And that's involving bringing all the messaging in and stuff like that on top. But equally now, rather than doing it for the behavioural analysis team, they're keen to do it for themselves. So we've enabled another part of the business and we've changed another element of organisational data culture. Fourth one and final one is one that sits at the heart of the kind of future mission for Sellafield. We've been preparing and storing waste packages for many, many years. But the packages of the future are likely to be a lot more sophisticated than the packages we have today. They'll do their own temperature measurement, pH measurement, pressures, weight, volume, mass, all of those kind of things, creating a steady stream of data which will get fed back and need to be analysed and extracted. And some of the legacy packages, as we advance down the roads of computer vision and things like this, will be able to scan far more, far quickly, and crunch the data to give us a sense of which ones we should be inspecting. But prior to doing this work, the sampling on packages was a fairly random activity. We've now got a far greater success rate in identifying packages that need to be examined by applying predictive analytics. And so we hope that this will scale and grow in the future. So those are the use cases. Now, we are at Big Data London, so I guess I should give a position on Sellafield Big Data. I was asked by a member of the exec once, what are you doing about big data? What would you like me to do about big data? But in truth, we're not a big data organisation. We're a wide data organisation is how we'll put it. All of the information that we generate and carry covers everything from kind of spatial to structured to huge amounts of unstructured, right down to the legacy records. So there's a huge history there of information. My aspiration is that Sellafield becomes a big data organisation, but not a big data organisation for the sake of being one. My aspiration is it becomes a big data organisation because we've got things right. Because as the 70% stat there says, lots of businesses are kind of maybe pulling back from the concept of big data and focusing on small and wide. In truth, it doesn't matter whether your data is small, wide or big, provided you've got the right data at the right time in order to do the things you want to do. And hopefully, if we do make a transition to becoming a big data organisation, then that's where we'll end up. So that's about it from me for today. We've got some time at the end if anybody does have any questions. Failing that, you can see me out at stand 424 at Alteryx, and I'll be floating about from the rest of the conference. But thank you very much for your time and your indulgence this morning, and I'd like you all to have a great conference.